Okie dokie. Continuation. Planner guide, we covered the end state. Okay, I guess this one is important. Let's put those to the... So the thing we're looking to do is find a way to have infinite Aang triggers. With the jackdaw example, we can do so with alternating between two clones. If we have two chains available, then the other option is to find... Usually the easiest ones are Preston and Felidar Guardian, or Starfield Vocalist and Felidar Guardian and a clone. With the case of Preston, if you have Preston out and you get Felidar Guardian out, you make a token copy of this one. This one shall blink Aang, and the token copy shall blink the Felidar Guardian. Upon entering, you make clones of these, and then you can rinse and repeat for infinite triggers. With the case of Starfield Vocalist and clone, Felidar Guardian enters, you have two triggers, blink Aang and the clone. They come back. This one as the Felidar Guardian, blink the Felidar Guardian and Aang, and rinse and repeat. Now, after you've gotten through your deck, what you want to do is, I'll just do this. What you can do is leave Volrath's Shapeshifter in the deck. Let's just get Preston and Felidar Guardian and Gigantoplasm out, for example. What you can do now is, upon entering, you can make infinite Felidar Guardians, you can make infinite Gigantoplasm Felidar Guardians, then you can bring Sakashima of 1,000 Faces out, and then you can also make infinite Prestons. With this game state, you have access to infinite Gigantoplasms, you can have access to infinite Gigantoplasm Aangs, and you just have like this kind of a board state. Now, step by step, what I would suggest for you to do is, first, after presenting infinite flickers, infinite Aang triggers, after you've brought these guys out, you can even make more of these, I guess it doesn't really matter. You can bring a flicker wisp. All of your Prestons trigger, so you make a ton of flicker wisp copies. Flicker wisp says that you remove a permanent from the game, and it returns to the play under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. What this means that you can also target lands, you can target whatever. Before this, you can also exile everything that is not a land with Preston. So as Preston makes illusion copies, you sacrifice 5 illusions. So for example, 5 Felidar Guardian illusions, and then you exile a non-land permanent, rinse and repeat. Note that for this, whenever a Felidar Guardian enters, you can also flicker your lands or mana engines or whatever. You can even bring a supportive parents out. It doesn't really matter. But at this stage, you have infinite mana, infinite Aang triggers, infinite amount of creatures. Now, when a Flicker Wisp enters, your infinite amount of Prestons trigger. You can do this, like, it depends on what part of the game you are in. If you're in your first main phase, what you want to do is bring these guys out. Exile everything your opponents have, so your opponents have nothing except their cards in hand. Now, you just need a way to restart this loop or sequence. So what you could do is either just exile one of your own Felidar Guardians or Flicker Wisp or whatever, an instant flicker it has to be. And then when you go to your end step, all of your Flicker Wisps trigger, and then you just choose to bring the Felidar Guardian back out first before your opponents get anything. The easier way for this is, you know, a Jackdaw Savior thing or Brennard or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But if you have Brennard out and you sacrifice your Gigantoplasm, that's the original one, then it returns as whatever it was, and you can then start Aang looping again on top. This is before your opponents get all of their permanents back. Your opponents only have their cards in hand. Now, what you could do is, if there was originally a win con on the board, then you don't need to do the flicker wisp thing either. If there's like an Orcish Bowmasters or something, you can have a clone enter as that, and then you can ping your opponents down. If there's no win outright on the table, what you can do is bring Lonis out. Lonis says whenever a creature enters, or rather another creature, you make a clue. So technically Prestons would trigger, and then you would just make an absurd amount of Lonises, and then you can then flicker whatever thing, and then, you know, get infinite clues. Then when you have infinite clues, you can draw your deck. When you draw your deck, the key cards to look for, or rather sequence right, is Cephalid Coliseum and Volrath's Shapeshifter. Now let's see, we can maybe do Visage Bandit for this example, so we get the idea. When you do your Aang triggers, you bring, no, not that one, Rallier, and a clone that is not a 2/2. You could even use just a regular card, but clone is the easiest here. So what you would want to do is bring a Renegade Rallier out. Remember the base principle how you get infinite flickers. If you have Preston, you get infinite flickers whenever you get the Felidar Guardian. So in response to some of your Felidar Guardian things, you can do whatever. So what you want to do at this stage, when you have infinite clues, infinite mana, you can start drawing your deck. Before you do that, bring Renegade Rallier out, and then you want to make sure that Cephalid Coliseum is still in the deck. If it's in the grave, you can just go for the Renegade Rallier, bring the Coliseum out and win from there. But what you want to do is end up with the Cephalid Coliseum in your graveyard. The way you can do this, because the list is so tight on slots and so layered, you can do so with Volrath's Shapeshifter discard ability. Technically, you can do this with a Mox Diamond as well. So if you drew into your Mox Diamond, then you could just play the Mox Diamond and then get that to your grave. But this depends on what the game state is. If you're in your main phase, then this is good. If you're in your end step, then you can't do this, because you would need to cast the Mox Diamond. But with Aang triggers, now in response to some of them, you would have to make sure that you have Visage Bandit enter as a Gigantoplasm creature, sacrifice it so that it's the top card in your grave. Now you would resolve Aang triggers and bring Volrath's Shapeshifter out, and now you are asked whether you want to apply the replacement effect of Visage Bandit or not. As long as the top card of your grave isn't a 0/0 creature like Gigantoplasm or most of the clones, Shapeshifter will retain its shape-changing ability and the chosen discard card. What you can now do is pay 2 mana out of your infinite, discard the Coliseum. This would mean that the Shapeshifter is just a 0/1 currently. And what you can do now is have Renegade Rallier enter, then you bring Cephalid Coliseum out, you activate it on one of your opponents. You just need to make sure you have enough cards in the grave. You can do this by bringing clones as Gigantoplasms, sacrificing them. Activate this once, and then you can just loop in this kind of manner. Felidar Guardian enters, you make an infinite amount of Felidar Guardians, have one of the token copies target the Felidar Guardian, and one target the Renegade Rallier. Now Renegade Rallier enters, you get a bazillion amount of them, but you just need one, because you need to make the, well, sure, this triggers, but you just bring the Coliseum out, then the Felidar Guardian clone will flicker the original Felidar Guardian, that will flicker this, and rinse and repeat. So now you can mill your opponents out. That was a bit of a lengthy explanation, but I guess something that you should just visualize is this sequence of having Preston, infinite Felidar Guardians, infinite Tank triggers. Then you can bring Sakashima out. Then you can flicker your Preston, make infinite Prestons, and now you have access to infinite Prestons, infinite Felidar Guardians, and infinite Shakashimas. Then you bring Gigantoplasm out. Then you can make everything have Gigantoplasm abilities. You can have those token copies enter as, Aang's or whatever. Notably, because Preston makes the token copies, you need to have a blank kind of a clone on the field. So for example, when Gigantoplasm enters, you could let the original one die. It becomes, well, Preston creates a 0-1 that does not have the that is not copying anything, so it would just be a vanilla token of Gigantoplasm with 0 and 1. And then when you have another clone enter, then you could apply the Preston effect to just make it. But this is like something that usually at the point where you have infinite Aang triggers and you say you're going to bring all of your creatures out, you will, and then you will win the game. Usually that's enough. Like very rarely will people say that, okay, play it out. In tournaments, it's correct to do so, and you can still say like we can save some time for a lunch break or something. But if your opponents insist on you playing it through, then what you want to do is assemble the infinite flickers, look if there's anything that lets you win on the table outright. If not, then flicker wisp away their permanents, then change phases so that they don't have mana floating, and then proceed to loop this thing. Text-based examples are in the primer, but build it piece by piece. Just make sure that you do the Volrath thing right. If you don't, it's still okay because you have Redemption Choir. So in the worst case scenario, you can just bring the Volrath's Shapeshifter out later, like recur pretty much everything with this card. Now, another thing to consider is even if you don't have access to, say, Cephalid Coliseum for some reason it's exiled, you have a Serum Visions hand with the Cephalid Coliseum in it and 7 other bad cards, then maybe you want to take the free mulligan and you exile those. If someone were to say that with a turbo list that looks to win on the turn 1 or turn 2, which means that there's a lot of time on the tournament clock, if building an infinite board state where your opponents can't have any non-land permanents and they also can only have their lands during their end steps, usually that should win the game, right? So what you can do is when you deploy this kind of an infinite board state, you go to your end step, and in your end step, you have Flicker Wisp enter, you make infinite Flicker Wisps, you exile your opponent's permanents, maybe the original Flicker Wisp, and now your opponents don't have anything on the field until their next end step. So they draw their card, they maybe play a land for a turn, that's it. End step, they start getting their permanents back one at a time. What you can do now is let them come back, maybe one at a time or all of them, doesn't really matter. And then you can have your Flicker Wisp enter, and then you can exile everything again. So this means that your opponents can only really play at instant speed. Also, against bounce spells or whatever, like your opponents can't really take any game actions. So then you end up back in your turn, and then you just swing everyone dead. I guess that's it for those parts. Now, in terms of what kind of cards we have in the deck, something that I want to cover is the base functions, which means that there's mana banks, which is the first type. So mana banks as a term, I use it for cards that you invest an X amount of mana into, and they give the X amount of mana back. For example, mana dorks are mana banks in a way. You invest 1 mana in them, and you get 1 mana in return. They do that like every turn. You get throughout the game. Usually, mana dorks would present you with more mana than you invested in them. But in this case, when we're looking to play Aang on turn 1 or turn 2, mana banks are the major thing that lets you do that turn 2 play. The way this works is if you have access to 2 mana on turn 1, for example with the Chancellor or, you know, Mox Diamond, Chrome Mox, these kind of effects. Gemstone Caverns also. So mana banks Devoted Druid, it taps for 1, but you can untap it once and then put, like, get another mana out of it. You invest 2 mana on turn 1. Say you have a land, Chromox, Devoted Druid. Now, on the field, you have 2 mana available turn 1, but next turn, if you play your land drop, you have 2 mana from your lands, 1 from your Chromox, and 2 from your Devoted Druid, which means 5, and you get to play Aang. Diamond Lion is like the superb mana bank here because it provides 3 mana, so this is very akin to LED, and notably it's also of any color, which is beneficial. But these effects, I pretty much run all of them. There are some that I am not currently on. One of the newer ones is Deseret, and Deseret is stronger with the Sol Land and Sol Ring starts. The term means the colorless lands, where you need 3 mana on turn 1, but Deseret has the additional text of being able to untap something. So for example, with Mana Vault, Deseret is really nice. You can untap your Mana Vault, and you can also find a Chromox or Lotus Petal or even LED. Deseret is generally a return rate of like 3 mana invested, and you get 3 mana out of it, which is the LED. But if you have something to untap with it, then it's even better. Notably, you can play this on turn 1. You could find, for example, a Chromox, and then you play the Chromox. You can tap it next turn and untap it with Deseret and tap it again. So Deseret is a more steep price on the front, but it has more mana that it can provide. Pentad Prism is one of the better mana banks here. Moonsilver Key is also interesting. It requires a total investment of 3 mana, but it gets you LED, which is 3 mana, right? Then Gaia's Touch. Ignore the part about extra forest. It's just 2 green, and it provides you with 2 green. The reason why this effect is good, even here, is because we have the filter lands. So if you're able to filter the green mana into an Aang cast, then very good. Doublers. Doublers as a card type is something that I consider cards that let you generate an additional Aang trigger one way or another. There are effects that work as both chain continuers and doublers. For example, in the case of Safi and Melira, if you play this before you cast Aang, so for example, turn 1 Safi, turn 2 Aang, Safi you can sacrifice in response to the original Aang trigger. Now if you find a clone which lets you legend rule kill the Aang, it will then come back and you have 2 Aang triggers originating from the original one. Also Safi, for example, if you have a chain where you found Gigantoplasm out and then your chain would end, you can then get Safi out, activate it on the Gigantoplasm, activate Gigantoplasm X is 0, and then it comes back and you get to continue the chain. But the doublers are different in like their nature. For example, Melira and Safi, they provide you 1 extra trigger. I was originally on Angelic Renewal, which is an enchantment-based similar effect that lets you bring Aang back, and that effect I've cut nowadays because I want to have the highest amount of creatures, so Aang hits, and Melira and Safi have some other utilization, like Loyal Retainers with Safi can let you infinitely generate mana with Relic of Legends or Supportive Parents, but anyway. Lonis is another interesting card. It's both the win condition outlet, also value, and also a win condition. If you have access to infinite flickers between 2 creatures, you have Lonis out, and then you get Felidar Guardian and a clone. You generate infinite clues, then you can activate Lonis and find whatever win condition from your opponents. The most clear doublers, Preston, Starfield Vocalist, and then there's these win condition doublers like Brenner, Luminous Broodmoth, Roaming Throne also, notably with Salvation Swan. If you have Salvation Swan and you get a new chain, if you have Roaming Throne enter, you can have it enter as a bird, which means that you would get a lot of triggers like Salvation Swan would enter from it entering, and then you get another trigger. Anyway, then we have chain continuers. This is just a general term I use for effects that let you continue the single chain of Aang triggers. So this is generally clones and flicker creatures. There are some scenarios where other cards can be chain continuers as well, like Safi and Melira, for example, but generally this is the easiest term to understand. Then I had some mentions I wanted to make. When you're playing the deck, remember that crop rotation is a filter effect. It's ramp and filtering. If you have a hand that is lacking say, one mana to cast Aang, you can use this, you can find Ancient Tomb, and you can cast Aang. If you're lacking colors, for example, in the case of you have 2 lands and a mana vault and only 2 colors available, you can use crop rotation and you can unlock 2 of your colors with these filter land effects. Enlightened Tutor's main targets are LED and mana vault, but there's occasional scenarios where you could use it to find Thassa, which is a delayed flicker effect, a doubler like Roaming Throne, or even a clone like Phyrexian Metamorph. Also some other options, like sometimes you could maybe want to find Relic of Legends, sometimes maybe Cream of the Crop. Notably, Season of Growth, Cream of the Crop, with infinite flickers, you get to stack your deck in different manners. Cream of the Crop lets you stack it all the way you want, but Season of the Growth lets you stack it like find whatever card you need for the next trigger. Then honorary mention I wanted to make for Renegade Rallier and Redemption Choir. If you have like an opener where you have Lion's Eye Diamond to open it, this is actually a good example because we have the Birthing Ritual here. So let's act like you go Gemstone turn 1, then you go land LED and activate. You just put that first into the graveyard, and then you would choose the order like so, Fleshcrafter on top. So if, for example, you would have an interesting case here where you maybe find a Felidar Guardian or something, and then you would actually just find Renegade Rallier and you have access to nothing else. You're like, oh man, there's no 2-drop clone. But oh wait, we've discarded a Birthing Ritual. Now with this coming from the Renegade Rallier as the LED left the field, you get to do this activation, 7 cards, and now from here you can continue the chain. So, you know, you could sacrifice this to get a flicker effect, you could get a clone to enter as a Felidar Guardian, you could continue from there. So sometimes Renegade Rallier, even without access to a 2-drop clone, can be a chain continuer. And this also works with other stuff. So let me just maybe we can have Safia. So if we have Redemption Choir online, let's act like Safi is just sitting there and somehow we didn't activate it. If you find Redemption Choir and we have Coven online, then notably this lets you find a 3-drop also. So for the sake of Food Chain, which I test, it was a test cut, even though I think the card is strong, but since then I've added it back. And for example, with the case of Food Chain and Redemption Choir, if your hand is like the LED thing, you find a chain which lets you have Coven online, and then you get Food Chain out. If you're in your main phase, you can now kind of turn this thing into an outright win, right? You eat a lot of creatures, eat Aang, recast Aang, and then keep going. I guess that is pretty much it for this video, which was supposed to be short and TLDR, but this turned out to be an hour long, I think, or something. I blabbered a fair bit. Stay tuned for more videos, more updates on the list. Currently, I guess the cards that I would be more excited to try is Samwise once I get it. With Samwise, you could do similar things as with Lonis, but this would leverage LED and legendary clones higher. So you could get infinite mana with LED and then sync that to whatever you want, pretty much. But that's it for now. I hope this video at least cleared something. Maybe this provoked some thoughts. I'm still really excited about the list, and I plan on playing this in probably all of the tournaments this year. I think this deck is really strong because there's no other deck that mulligans to 3 as consistently as this deck does. Also, something to mention, I guess, if you're interested in coaching about cEDH overall or Aang specifically, do hit me in the comments or you can DM me on Discord and we'll figure it out. I have some coaching sessions coming up, so I'm excited about them. And notably, like compared to watching videos, compared to the text, when you're interacting with someone and that someone is capable of understanding what the question actually originates from. So if you have some confusion about the deck, an interaction that doesn't seem to click, usually there's something that hasn't really clicked yet, and then it's on the coach or the teacher to make you understand that thing. So I'm really happy to have interest in the list. I'm really happy to have interest in coaching. This is peak hobbying for me. I really like it. So thank you for your interest. This video was not so TLDR after all, but I'll still upload it and hopefully you enjoy it. So thank you for watching and stay tuned. See you later.